Something new is coming to the Diocese of Harrisburg, rooted in faith, built on tradition, and focused on you. The Catholic Witness magazine is a brand new diocesan initiative, building on the trusted legacy of the Catholic Witness you've known and loved for years, now reimagined for today's church. Each issue will bring you inspiring stories of faith in action, updates from Bishop Senior, highlights from parishes across the diocese, and a deeper look at the mission we share as Catholics in central Pennsylvania. Underwriting and advertising opportunities are now available. To learn more about how your business could reach more than 60,000 households, visit thecatholicwitness.org/Catholic Witness Magazine and watch for the inaugural issue of the Catholic Witness Magazine coming this spring. A fresh voice, a familiar foundation, and a renewed commitment to sharing the good news.
And I think if we see the value in it, it changes the perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, I know I can turn to someone and it can really help me.
Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel and you're listening to episode 200 of Candid Catholic Convos, a show about Catholicism that enriches your faith, answers your questions, and meets you wherever you're at on your faith journey. The funny thing about faith is that there is no one-size-fits-all. No roadmap that says, follow these steps for guaranteed entry into heaven. See, I was born into the faith, but I also walked away for years. I always envied those who talked about their relationship with Jesus like he's in the room with them. But I also felt silly praying a prayer that wasn't pre-written for me. I always wondered what it felt like to be on fire for Christ. But I also thought maybe it's just not meant for me. I thought something was wrong with me until I learned that Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta also struggled like I do. And her struggle lasted for 50 years. If she can do it, so can we. But before we dig into how we can find faith after disappointment, disillusionment, spiritual dryness, or loss, let's start with Scripture. Today's verse comes from Luke chapter 24, verse 32. Did our hearts not burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures? Okay, we need to back up here because this verse is at the tail end of a much longer story, the one about the road to Emmaus. So let's set the scene. 2 disciples are walking away from Jerusalem, away from the place where everything was supposed to make sense. Their hopes had been high, their expectations clear, and now everything felt undone. Jesus is gone, and as they walk, they replay events over and over, trying to understand where things went wrong, what they could have done differently, what could they possibly do now. And then Jesus joins them. Now, he doesn't reveal himself immediately. He walks with them in their confusion. He listens to their disappointment. He lets them speak their grief out loud. They say, "We had hoped." Those 3 words carry so much weight. How many times in our own lives have we hoped for a better outcome? Have we hoped that our prayers would be heard, only to be met with an outcome we didn't expect and cannot currently accept? And like any good friend, Jesus responds patiently, gently, unfolding the story of God in a way their tired hearts can finally receive. Still, they don't recognize him, because understanding comes slowly. It isn't until the breaking of the bread that their eyes are opened. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished out of their sight. Jesus is revealed not in spectacle, but in familiarity, in a meal, in presence, in something ordinary. Afterwards, the disciples reflect, did our hearts not burn within us while he talked to us on the road? What they felt along the way mattered, even before they knew what it meant. This verse is a stark reminder that God often meets us while we're moving away, not toward. That clarity may come after the walk, not at the beginning or even during. And that sometimes faith is rekindled not by answers, but by companionship, by realizing we were never walking alone. The road back doesn't always feel holy, but Emmaus shows us that it can still be sacred. Today's Saint Spotlight shines on St. Augustine of Hippo. St. Augustine didn't start out as a saintly overachiever. For years, he was brilliant, restless, and deeply dissatisfied. He chased success, pleasure, and intellectual answers, but none of it settled his heart. He even flirted with religious ideas that promised clarity, but delivered confusion. And somewhere along the way, faith felt like something that should work, but didn't. What I love about St. Augustine is how honest he is about that emptiness. It's an emptiness I've certainly felt in my life, and it's one I'm sure most of us can relate to. But while many of us may gloss over this feeling, Augustine never pretends that belief comes easily or that God immediately fixed his life. Instead, he describes a long season of resistance, boredom, and disappointment, especially with himself. He wanted truth, but he didn't want surrender. His turning point wasn't dramatic fireworks or a perfectly reasoned argument. It was a quiet moment in a garden, hearing a child's voice say, "Take and read." Augustine opens scriptures, read a few lines, and something shifts. Not because all of his questions are answered, but because his heart finally stops running. Later, Augustine would write, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." That rest didn't erase his past or his struggles, but it reframed them. Augustine discovered God hadn't been absent during all those years of wandering. He had been patiently waiting. Augustine's story reminds us that faith doesn't always arrive clean and confident. Sometimes it comes after exhaustion. Sometimes it comes when we finally admit that whatever we're clinging to just isn't enough. Now let's move on to our marquee topic, because at some point in all of our faith journeys, we'll experience a season of loss, disappointment, or just a time when we feel very far away from God. So to help unpack how we move through this season, I'm excited to welcome Father Ted Keating, pastor of Mary Mother of the Church in Mount Joy. Father Ted, thank you so much for joining me on Candid Catholic Convos. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
It's a privilege. So thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. And to you listeners out there, I thank you for listening.
Over the past 30 years that you've been doing this, I'm sure you've seen and met people from all walks of faith. You've probably seen all different periods of I guess states of faith would probably be the best way to describe it, because, as much as people think that faith is a straight line, it never really is. It's that, like that Robert Frost poem, the path less traveled. So let's talk about that a little bit, because the theme of this episode is finding your faith again, whether it's after disillusionment or a disappointment. So let's talk a little bit about disappointment itself, like in terms of the faith. How would you describe that for somebody who is not quite sure what they're feeling when it comes to the faith?
It's funny, when you first asked me and sent the email to see if I would do this, I had just finished a book by Lee Strobel. So he's a Protestant and he tries to handle all questions about our faith in a very objective way. So he wrote a book called Is God Real? And so he handles the different proofs of God. And then in the last 2 chapters of that book, he says the biggest reason why people leave the faith is it because of disappointments. And it's interesting. But, he said something in that book, Rachel, that really kind of struck me. He said, the people are really, they leave the faith. And he said he understands that. He said, but what are they leaving to? He said, the other side doesn't have any answers whatsoever. He said, they don't even have any solutions. They don't have any explanations. And he said, a lot of people leave. And he often wonders, where are they going? To what? To who? And I think, it was an interesting comment, isn't it? To think that, like, we don't really think in those terms, and I think we need to. Recently I read an article about a woman, and she grew up in a very poor family, and she struggled. None of her family ever went to college, and she had this dream since she was a little girl being a doctor. So her whole life, she got to college. She had to quit her second year of college because she had to take a year off to help with finances. Then she went back to school, got accepted to med school, gets out of med school, and she's all excited. Life is going to be good. So she joins a practice with 7 other doctors. And the lead female doctor who's in charge of the office, her and this woman, they didn't get along. It was a personality, problem. And she went out to dinner one night with one of her best friends who happened to be a therapist. And she was telling her that she's just really struggling with her job and not sure what to do. And the therapist said to her, "Who told you being a doctor would be easy?" And I think, Rachel, we come to these expectations. We think when we go into a marriage, it's going to be easy. We think when we graduate and get our first job, it's going to be easy. When I became a priest, it's going to be easy. When we go into the church, it's going to be easy. So we have these expectations constantly going on. You know what I mean? And I think that's why it's really tough, because in our brain, I think at one hand, we think or we know there's going to be problems in our life. But at the same time, we don't expect them to be in personal ways. And they really hit us in a very deep way. And even in our faith, it hits us in that same way. And I think we just have to, there's a couple things I think we need to do. And I think, Rachel, we approach religion and we don't see the value in it. I really do. Like, if you Google the benefits of prayer to Mr. Google, who is certainly not Christian, he approaches everything from a scientific standpoint. This is what he'll say to you. And he points it out in that little paragraph. He'll say it reduces stress and anxiety. It fosters hope and purpose. It improves mood and self-esteem. It helps our mental clarity. Like, that's what Mr. Google says it does. And I think it does, but we need to be able to enter into that. Do you know what I mean? And I think some people have these expectations of our faith, just like marriage, and like nothing's supposed to go wrong. And yet we come to church and we see people that we don't care for. We may not like the homily. We may not like the music. You know the list. It can go on and on and on. And it puts us in this negative frame of mind. And I think if we see the value in it, it changes the perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, I know I can turn to someone and it can really help me. And I think, if we could get ourselves and see the value in our faith and always start with prayer, that's where we need to start. Like, take some time. When he was in the boat and there was this big storm going on. So disappointments are really storms in our life, right? That's what they are. Those storms take various shapes. There's just different types of storms. We all have them. They're in the boat, and what's Jesus doing? He's sleeping. He's sleeping. And he wakes up and they said, "Don't you care about us? Like, we're dying out here. This boat is almost submerged. Are you going to do something?" Now, do you know the first word he said to the sea? He said, "Quiet." He said, "Quiet." If we face a storm outside, I think the last thing was like, stop raining, stop. The waves, like, we would say, stop. But he says quiet before he tells it to stop. And I think he's trying to tell us, like, if you want to stop the storms in your life, you gotta stop the brain first, right? Because that's where it all starts first. And the brain can be our enemy. It can be our enemy, you know? And I think we need to quiet that. So this is our prayer needs to take shape.
And it's so funny to hear you mention the rosary because I was mulling over what I was going to do for Lent this year. And it came to me last night. I was like, I should probably pray the rosary every day because I like praying the rosary, but I haven't been doing it consistently. So I was like, maybe I'll do that for Lent. And then to hear it come out of your mouth, I'm like, okay, there's my validation. I hear you. We're good. Okay, that's what I'm doing for Lent.
But see,
You're
what
right.
you know what that does, Rachel?
Hmm.
It people say, oh, it's repetitive and it's boring, it's monotonous. And I say, oh, yes, it is. Exactly. But that's what we need to quiet our brain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we can't really function while our brain is in full speed in the middle of this storm. And the rosary does an awesome job, like settling us down.
It's
And,
very
and
meditative.
yeah, yeah. And it just puts us in a better frame of mind, in a better place, so that we can just function in a better way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're right. Those storms, your brain starts to just automatically go into, well, how can I fix this? How can I? And sometimes it doesn't require us white knuckling ourselves through it. It requires this form of surrender. But if we're not used to surrendering, it can feel like we're pushing a big boulder up a hill continuously. And it's something that is, I guess you could say that surrender is kind of like a learned quality, like a learned trait. And when you can't surrender, that's where it feels like I'm failing or
You're
I'm,
stuck.
yeah, you're stuck. That's where that disappointment kind of settles in because you want to have control over it and you don't actually have control over the situation. So let's dig a little bit deeper here into this disappointment. How can we distinguish between a crisis of faith and a season of disappointment or spiritual dryness? Because I think a lot of times what happens is people might experience that season of dryness and think, well, this isn't working for me, and then they walk away, when in fact this was just one of those storms, and all storms pass eventually, that it ends up becoming a crisis of faith when really it was just a season of spiritual dryness.
Do you know what the biggest thing we have to do when we go into this? The first thing we always have to get into our brain is to do what? Like, keep going, to
Mm-hmm.
push on,
Like Dory, just keep swimming, just keep.
Yes, yes. You just, we stop and no, you gotta, it's that great story of Florence Chadwick when she was the first woman to swim the Catalina Channel,
Mm,
and, and she failed the first time and she was just a quarter mile offshore. And they said to her, what happened? Was it the sharks? And she said, no. Was it the cold water? And she said, no. Were you tired? And she said, actually, I wasn't. She said, well, what stopped? And she said, it was the fog. And so that's what we want to do. Like, we want to like keep focusing on the problem. Like, and she's like, so she did it like a month later and she swam that. But she said, when I'm in the water, what did I need to do? Keep swimming, right? So if you're in a season, before you can do anything, you want to just keep going.
mm,
Like, don't evaluate anything during a season because it just there's too much fog there. And it really is. We need to kind of just focus first and just keep going. And so, we think we need words, Rachel, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can just stare at an image, but we need something to deflect our brain to a different place, right? And that helps. That truly helps.
yeah, it does. It's again going back to that meditative state where you don't. I think so often we get stuck on it has to be perfect or it doesn't count. Like I personally, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I personally struggle with, like, if it's not a pre-scripted prayer, like the Hail
Yeah,
Mary
right.
or the Our Father, I am so paralyzed by perfection that I can't think of anything. And that's not what God's asking of us. He's just asking us to just be and let him
To show up
just show up. That's all we
with
have to
with
do.
an open heart,
Mhm.
show up. Yeah.
But
It,
with that disappointment, I mean, so I'll tell a little story of my own. My husband, when we were now this story has a happy ending, but my husband and I, when we were first married, we spent 5 years, 4 or 5 years, trying to have a baby. And when we that was a period of testing faith beyond all measure. And then when we finally did conceive, he had joined the army and was about to leave for boot camp. And a week before he left for boot camp, we lost the baby. So
oh,
then we were 6 months apart from each other with, nothing but letter writing, because they weren't allowed to have their cell phones. And that was a time that I remember being very angry, not just like with the church, but with God. Like, he and I were not on speaking terms, because I couldn't understand why he wouldn't let me have what I wanted to have. And I it was towards the end of my husband's, like, they call it AIT, so like the training for his job. And I remember going to confession, because I don't know why, but I was like, I feel like I need to go to confession. So I went, and this poor priest on the other side, I was like yelling at him, because I was like, I'm so angry at God and I can't understand. And now I feel like I'm sinning because I'm angry at God. And he looks at me dead in the face and he says, I'm pretty sure God can take it. You'll be all right. And then sure enough, when my husband came home from AIT, we conceived my oldest son, who's now 10. And then we had two more back to back after that. So again, it has a happy ending. But for a lot of people, like during that period of anger and disappointment, like that would be a big driver away from the church, of like, I didn't get what I wanted. So why even bother? Or like sometimes I find myself thinking that, and I know that this isn't necessarily the right thing to think, but it's a very common human thing, of like, if I pray the right prayers, or if I'm doing the right thing, then it's almost like a lucky charm, that I should
sure.
get what I'm I should get what I'm asking for, because I'm doing all the right things. But that's not how this works. So how should someone approach prayer or faith in general when they're feeling cynical or angry or disappointed, and just so far away from God?
Do exactly what you did. Do exactly what you did. You kept showing up. We think that we're not supposed to have this anger. Well, we can't help it. Like
It's a human emotion, yeah.
that's a very deep, deep pain when you can't have children. You know people that are on. I know people. It's
Mhm.
a very deep pain because there again, we expect to be able to have a child when we're married. We expect it, and that expectation's not met. So, but you know what else you did? You had this anger, and you took it to a place where you needed to take it. Like you did something with it. Do you know what I mean? You just didn't hold on to it. You went to confession. Now you didn't even know this was part of the discussion
Nope.
or even part of but you know what I mean, Rachel? You did something with it. Like we just want to hold on to it.
Mhm.
But the church gives us this beautiful avenue. And that's a whole different, this is a whole different topic of confession, but that's a start, isn't it? Like that
Mhm.
change, that started you in a different journey, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It gave you a place to put this because it's going to happen. Like we get angry and it's okay. But we have to do something with it. We just don't want to hold on to it. You took it to a place where you needed to take it and look what happens. It, so you just can't stand there with it.
Mhm.
You need to do something with it. It needs to be a two-way street with it. And I think too many people today are walking away and holding on to this thing. And I think we have to be really careful with that.
So then let's say you came across somebody who feels like they've been so angry, they've been so far away from God for so long, that they've gone too far, that they can't come back. What would you say to somebody who's in a position like that, where they feel like they've gone so far the opposite direction that they don't know how they're ever going to find their way back?
Yeah, you have to start really, really small. Uh, and I mean really small. I read this book years ago. It's called Creating Atomic Habits.
Yes, I love that book.
Yeah, but it was an
Mhm.
interesting book because it's really meant for business people.
Mhm.
And I was like, why am I reading this? But it really kind of formed in a different way that, creating good habits in your life start very, very small. Like if somebody that wants to work out, they said for the first week, all you do is dress up in your sweats. And then the second week, you go to the place where you're going to work out. Don't go in, just drive there. And then the third week, you get in your sweats, drive there and walk in, but don't work out. And by the fourth week, you're ready to go. And so I always say to them, start small. Take an image that you like, whether it's a crucifix, whether it's a holy image, whatever, or like a statue, and just sit there for 3 minutes and stare and say, Lord, be close to me. I think we need a presence first. So that's what Lord, be close to me, because I think we need that presence first. And if they can get, then they move from there. But initially, you got to start small, just 2 to 3 minutes, getting a little image, Lord, be close to me, and that type of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that. And it's going to help us put us in a better perspective. So Father Ted, thank you so much for walking us through this. And I'm sure we could keep talking all day about disappointment and disillusionment and finding our way back. But the point is, as long as we keep going, there is always a way back. So
There
thank you so
is.
much for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, listeners. God bless you.
And that's our show. Candid Catholic Convos is brought to you by the Diocese of Harrisburg, hosted and sound engineered by me, Rachel Trochet, and produced by Rachel Bryson. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it on social media. You can tag us using @HBGDiocese. Make sure you also subscribe on your preferred listening platform so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to support our production efforts, a donation to our diocesan annual campaign would benefit us greatly in continuing our ministry. We have lots of exciting episodes planned for 2026, including a series on Lent and how to make the most out of yours this year. So subscribe, keep praying for us, and we'll keep praying for you.